My oldest, at a very young age, he absolutely adored his mom. She would change his diaper, and to get him to calm down, she'd put her blonde hair in his face. And at 2 years old, he would walk down the Barbie aisles and look at Barbies and call it mommy doll. And he didn't want to play with the bats and the balls and the cars and the dinosaurs and all those things. He wanted to play with dolls. He had all these dresses and wigs and heels, and he wanted to do makeup like his mom, and he wanted to be like her. And one day I gotten fed up with it. I went to pick him up from a friend's house, and he was wearing a dress and a wig and had makeup, and I was like, it's time to go. And there was a big fight, and there was that selfish part of me that's like, why can't I have a son that's just normal? And so that day I came home and I gathered up all of his stuff and I threw it all away. I was at a personal development retreat, and I was talking to one of my mentors, and he looked at me and he said, Jeremy, what are you afraid of? I said, I'm afraid that my son might be gay. He said, well, what if that's true? And he went on to kind of share with me about like the statistics of people that are gay, suicide rates. And he's like, why do you think that is? And I was like, I feel like probably because they don't feel accepted. And he goes, yeah. He goes, so if all of those things were true, would you still love him? And I said, absolutely, without a doubt. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was living in complete fear. And so I flew home the next morning. I drove into the house. I picked him up. I took him to the store, and we picked out the most beautiful Elsa dress. And he hugged and kissed me like crazy that day. And then a couple weeks later, I surprised him. I ordered a 6'3", 220-pound size dress that could fit me. And I walked in with that dress and asked him if I could play with him, and he was just lit.
This is an interview with Jeremy and Taryn Neves. Jeremy and Taryn are a power couple. They're a couple that you look at and you just think, man, how do I get that? How do I have that? But in this episode, we talk about the fact that it hasn't always been that way. Talk about some of their struggles early on in marriage. Talk about the several miscarriages that they had along the way. And then we talk about their healing journey together. And so they really take us on this journey with them on where they were and how they've gotten to where they're at today. Jeremy leads a men's coaching group and Taryn leads a women's coaching group. And they've dedicated their lives to helping support men and women who might be struggling in their personal lives, in their marriages, in their relationships, in their spirituality. We talk about how to get into integrity with your spouse. I think this is, for those who are married or in a relationship, maybe the most important thing that we can master. And we also talk about their 8-year-old son, Nixon, who at a young age has chosen to be a girl and how they've dealt with that. So strap in. Welcome to the Rollercoaster Podcast, and thank you for being here.
Taryn, Jeremy, Neves, welcome to the Rollercoaster Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Excited to have you guys. We're going to get right into it. What's one word that you guys would each use to describe the current state of your relationship together?
That's a great question. I would say interdependent.
I would say growth.
Why, Taryn?
Jeremy and I have had a challenging relationship. We've been through the ringer and we've built what we have today. It hasn't always been this way. I believe that we both have done a lot of growth and healing together and individually. And I think it takes two independent, strong people to be interdependent in their relationship. And we've worked hard to build that and create that.
Jeremy, what'd you say growth?
I feel like there's been a long journey of growth, but currently in this state, one, I feel like we're in the best place we've ever been in our relationship, but we're still growing. I feel like we're being challenged in different ways to put into action the things that we've learned about trusting each other. A huge focus has been on our honesty with each other, just going to a different level of telling the truth, which is causing us to grow and look at things about ourselves, about our relationship, about the way we want things to be, And so I feel like we're definitely growing tremendously right now.
This is beautiful. Can you frame up where your relationship was at its lowest point, and how did it get there? Like I want all the details.
We'll go there.
Here's why, right? Like studies show that the majority of marriages, first of all, the divorce rate higher than it's ever been in history.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But the marriages that are still together, like 70% or more, are not in a good place and likely have either thought about divorce in the last year or will get divorced in the next year.
Wow.
So there's a lot of people right now that are struggling in their marriage. So just maybe paint the vision for where and how your marriage got to that low point.
Yeah. So I'll start. I feel like some of the elements, if I were to go back to the opposite of where we are today, both of us were extremely insecure. I had a pattern of wrong and bad. It was my trigger. Anytime she would say something, if like holding me accountable or bringing certain emotions, I would be feeling this sense of like, oh, I'm wrong or I'm bad. And so I would avoid it. And we would go to this class. We're both very type A. And her pattern was not good enough. And so if she wasn't feeling good enough, then I took that as, oh, I'm wrong or I'm bad.
Yeah.
There was a lot of yelling. There was a lot of, our communication was terrible. We both hid things from each other. Past mistakes, fears, doubts. This was a time when I was growing a business and I would carry everything. I remember a time when I had a massive lawsuit against me from the government for some frivolous thing that happened from my door-to-door sales guys. And I've got guys that are threatening to leave. Like I'm worried that I'm losing my company and I'm not able to come home and talk to her about it at that time because I'm just like, I don't want her to feel stressed. There was, it was just toxic. The things we would say to each other, we'd call each other names.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Just really in fear, really in scarcity. For me, I think the worst advice that I ever got when we got married was you have a year to train your husband. But that's like how it was back then, 12 years ago. And in the LDS community, it's like, this is how you teach your husband to treat you. And so if he did anything that I felt was inappropriate, and I came from an abusive home, so I was ready to like anything that was not up to par with how I wanted to live. I was like, this is done. We are not dealing with this. So I was aggressive in how I dealt with situations, which did put him into I'm wrong and bad. And we were both totally type A. We yelled a lot. Our bishop lived next door to us.
shared a wall with us.
Shared a wall with us when we were first married.
Like in an apartment?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
And he
literally
was
the
like,
master bedroom
bless your
wall was
guys'
the same master bedroom wall as his, like all the things. He actually came and talked to me once and was like, I remember we got into a fight and she was yelling at me and I went outside of the door and sat on the stairs. And like 3 minutes later, he comes out pretending like he was going somewhere and he's like, hey, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, I heard that. He's like, I'm really sorry. I hope you guys are okay. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
Did that end up, resulting in this pain, right? A lot of times when people's marriages get to that point, it leads to drug or alcohol use because they're trying to suppress whatever pain they're feeling in their marriage, or it leads to infidelity. So did you guys have issues with those as you kind of hit this rock bottom point in your marriage?
No, we didn't have either of those. I struggled with porn. That was kind of an area that
that's another good one. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of an outlet for me to soothe or, but yeah, no drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
Closing down, hiding, running, avoiding. Those were massive for us.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was just stuffing my emotions. We just got to a point where we actually separated our first year of marriage for a short time. And it was like, hey, I love this person. I know he's a good person. And so we wanted to make this work. We went to therapy and our therapist was absolutely horrible, had never been married. And
how can you be a marriage
it was
therapist
awful.
I don't care how much school you've been through, but you've never been married. You don't understand the dynamic there.
No, not at all. And
I
so
always give Jimmy shit about that. I'm like, dude, how are you coaching these guys?
Yeah.
He's like, I bring in great people. I'm
Yeah,
like, okay,
he does.
It's fair. It's fair. He does. Yes. So we had this therapist who was not helpful. So it literally got to a point where it was like, okay, we're going to stuff everything pretty much at this point. It was aggressive. And so we went the opposite direction and stuffed everything. I had 4 miscarriages during that time. I had a lot of health problems during that time because of stuffing my emotions. And that's just how we dealt with it until we learned not to.
I think that a sign of a really great marriage is when you hit these rock bottoms, either of you, and the first person you think to call is your spouse.
Mm.
To me, that's like the number one metric of like, is your marriage in a great place where when you're going through it, you're at a really low point. It's like, you're not calling your number one buddy or your parent or your sibling, right? Like, you're calling your spouse. You're like, dude, I'm struggling right now. Here's what's going on, right? Yeah, I've had those experiences in my own marriage where I've hit some lows, some really low lows, and Brooklyn, my wife, was not even considered as the first person that I was going to call. Like, not even in question. Like, dude, what's she going to think about me if I tell her what I'm dealing with right now, right? So I think I appreciate you guys framing that up. Now, the real question is, you know, how do you deal with the lying and the fighting and the insecurity and the name calling and the aggression and the, you know, the porn addiction and right? So you guys get to this place, somehow you don't get divorced permanently. Like, how does this happen? You know, fast forward, what is it, 10 years?
Yeah.
Fast forward 10 years. Like, how do you get to this place?
We're really 5 years. I feel like they talk about the 7-year itch. So I always remember the 7-year, like, divorce was on the table.
Yeah.
Like, we were talking about it. We were thinking about it. And it would come up in fights. It's like, well, this is the only option.
Yeah.
We're 12 years in. So it's been about 5 years of that transition. But yeah, what do you feel? You go first.
I think there's a number of things that happened that pushed us into reality of what was actually going on here. Number one, Jeremy had to sell his company. It was a forced sell. That was a really hard time for him. And he did. He called me on the phone crying. It was one of those moments like you're talking about where it's like, here's this low. And he called me really upset. And it was like, oh, I got you. Right. And that was, I think, the first time that it was like, okay, we're going to be a team now. Right. We can rebuild from here, because he had his business prior to us being married, and he was very successful prior to us being married. And so that was a huge shift. And really around the same time is when we were dealing with situations with our son. And so it was like, we're going through these hard times. We can either choose to show up and let ourselves be seen, or we can keep digging our heels in, and this is just going to get worse.
Yeah. Yeah, that I'm glad I had you go first, reminding me of that. That was shortly before this happened, before the company transition, everything else in 2018 was, I had also for the first time started going into personal development. I had spent about 2 years now in personal development and had a coach and was going to events and I remember showing up to a retreat and them saying, like, freedom is being who you're truly meant to be. And all I was wanting was to feel free. I was feeling completely in captivity. Like, I couldn't go do anything for myself. I felt guilty towards my business. I felt guilty towards my family. Like, I love to golf. And it's like, if I go spend a couple hours on the golf course, I felt so guilty. I had to hide it from everybody. But when it was like, freedom is being who you're truly meant to be. I saw all the ways that I wasn't being myself and I was hiding myself and I wasn't showing that. And so it created a process. It started a process where we, I started getting into integrity with her and sharing things that I was afraid of, doubts, fears, concerns, things I had hid my whole life. It's fascinating. A big turning point for us was when we got married. When we were dating, we were in a singles ward together, and you grew up LDS as well, so you understand this, but our bishop had given some advice, and he had said, don't ever talk about past transgressions with the current relationship. You know how people get into relationships and you talk about, today they call it body count. Back then I was like, who have I made out with? And, what things have I done with somebody and whatever else. And he said, don't talk about that. It doesn't serve your relationship. And once you've repented, you're forgiven. It's as if it never happened. And so we both agreed, hey, we're not going to talk about things we've done with other boyfriends and girlfriends and things like that. And we both agreed to that. But then 2 weeks before we got married, she came to me and she said, hey, I just have one question. Are you a virgin? And I just said, yeah, but I wasn't. And I remembered that conversation with the bishop, and I was grateful. Like, hey, we're not talking about this. We both agreed.
Yeah.
So we don't have to talk about this.
You're doing the right thing.
So I'm doing the right thing here, right? But I didn't sit well with me. And so I went to a couple mentors of mine, leaders of mine, and I shared the situation. They said, no, you don't need to share that. You don't need to. But I knew inside I did. Like, for me, I was not being honest, right? Well, we're 7 years into marriage, and it had come up 2 or 3 different times throughout marriage, throughout those years. And I was at a retreat, personal development retreat, and I had this freedom as being who you're truly meant to be. And I saw that that was a ceiling I was bumping up against, and I had to be honest. And so I called her and I just said, hey, I'm coming home tomorrow, get a babysitter, pick me up. Let's go spend a couple of days at a hotel. Let's spend some time together. And I sat her down and I came clean, and I just said, hey, you need to know this. And she was very upset, very, felt very betrayed. Obviously, the biggest thing was that I had lied. It wasn't what had happened. It was that I had lied and that I had carried that for so long. And so it made her question, like, where are you at? But from that point, it became this like mission that we're going to be honest with each other about these things. And if there's, I look at, you choose one person you're going to be married to, and you're going to be with for the rest of your life. Don't you want to have at least one person that you can be completely honest with, that can completely see you, especially when it hurts and it's hard and it's embarrassing and it's shameful or whatever it is. And that was a massive turning point for us, where it kind of just put a stake in the ground, and thought that would be the hardest time ever. But I think it just gets harder every time you have to come into integrity with things that are tough to see and look at.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about, I think you mean the same. I don't want to make any assumptions, and I'd love for you guys to describe what you mean by this, but it's something I hear a lot in your guys' world of like healing, which is being in integrity with your spouse. Mm-hmm. Like, what does that mean exactly? Like, if you get all the way there and you guys are, I'm guessing it's a 2-sided thing. It's not just the male or just the female, right? So what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
It's a great question.
So the integrity is being aligned with your values and your principles, and complete transparency, radical truth.
Yeah, we call it radical honesty.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, oh, here's what I've done. It's like, oh, here's what I'm searching for. For women, this is what I did with myself. And this is what I coach a lot of women on. But I would seek validation from other men because I wanted to feel good enough, or I wanted him to think I was good enough. And it was just being honest with what we call it leaks, like what my leaks are, what I'm seeking, what holes I have, what my trauma is, and what stories I created from there, and what choices I'm making, right? I think there's a lot of relationships that struggle financially. We have just not seeing eye to eye on how budgeting or where money should go, or I would spend a lot of money because it was how I dealt with situations that I felt out of control around. So it was like, hey, let me be honest with why I'm doing this. And the cool thing is it's not just being honest with somebody else. That's being radically honest with myself, right? When I can be honest of why am I going and spending this money? Like, what am I searching for? and I can tell him that, number one, he can now help me and he can call me forward. And I can now learn to fill those things on my own, like fill those holes, give myself that validation, finds a healthier way. So then I can show up in a relationship as a whole version of myself.
That's beautifully said. I think, you know, how do you guys think about this though, right? I think you guys are two incredibly open people with what you've been through. I mean, we're sitting here on a podcast that's going to be seen by hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people. And you guys are like getting vulnerable, right? And you do this with your groups the men that you coach and the women that you coach, right? So where do you toe the line of like, you know, the radical honesty with your spouse versus what should be shared with the world, maybe outside of that intimate connection with your person? Or do you just say, we go all the way, all the time, and it doesn't matter?
No, I don't think we go all the way, all the time, and it doesn't matter. I think that there's respect for our partner, and we have stepped into this space because we've learned a lot, but that doesn't mean we don't continually go through things. Yeah. But that there's a big difference between like airing what I'm going through and airing something that I've been going through in the past. Just because lessons haven't been learned, it's like opening a wound that's fresh to the world. Like they're going to stab it and judge it rather than something that's been like healed and scarred over, you know? So we're careful. We do share a lot. In the name of teaching and love and helping others, and not everything.
Yeah, I feel like that's been one of the beautiful things of our growth is, like I said, there's the pattern of hiding and like shame and guilt and being people pleasers or trying to gain, you know, favor by showing the best parts of ourselves. And as we've slowly opened up and shared more of our pain and our path and like our mistakes, the impact of that has been massive. The messages we get, the connection we get, because people go, okay, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
It's been so beautiful. Now there's been some people that have taken advantage of that and used those things against us in ways that it's like, it's tough to not want to shut back down from time to time and be like, let's just keep this to us. But the net positive has always been positive. Yeah. And so I feel like we're continuing to step into that and be conscious of, you know, how to do that best.
I really want to talk about how does somebody get there, right? How does somebody get to a place of full, radical transparency, honesty, trust in a relationship and being in integrity, right? Like, it's cool to say, but you guys have spent years getting to the place that you're at today, right? So what's the path?
I think it starts with, so you got to start with yourself. You got to be aware. I feel like I have a really intense conscience, and I also wear my emotions on my sleeves. So like, if something's off, you're noticing it, and I'm noticing it, and I might not admit to what it is, but like I'm very, very aware. So that part hasn't been super hard for me. It's taking the next step. So for most, I think they need to become aware of like, hey, where am I not being honest with myself? Where am I out of integrity? And your integrity and my integrity could be completely different. You might think that, hey, watching porn from time to time is okay. I know that doesn't serve me. And so I'm putting a flag in the ground and saying, hey, this is something that I'm, you know, not bringing into my space. Yeah. So that's out of integrity for me, right? But you figure out what your integrity is. You become aware of where you're out of integrity and be honest with yourself. I have conversations in the mirror. I look myself in the eyes and say, okay, listen up, dude. It's just you and me. Nobody else is around. What's going on? Like, what are we doing here? This isn't serving us. So getting real with myself. Maybe that means writing it down and just admitting it to myself, not showing anyone else. And that might be such a big step for somebody, but just doing that, you can't unsee it. Once that's there, you now know. And I think that internal like thermometer of like, hey, I'm ready to grow now, that'll keep coming up, and you'll know that that's a barrier you're going to have to break through. Yeah. Then it's who can I talk to? Maybe at phases of my life, and there were times where Taryn was not the one I could talk to about the thing that maybe involved her, and that was the ultimate goal, was like, hey, I need to come into integrity with Taryn. But there's people in my vault, my inner circle, the people that like I can confide in, that can hold that, that won't judge me, that will love me through it, that are there for me no matter what, that share values, that are on the same path as me. And I identify who those people are, and then I can go to them. And I've had some incredible men along the way that have done that for me, and not been in a place where they're like, hey, you've got to go do this. It's like, I need you to hold this and not make me go do anything else right now. I appreciate that you're the guy that will tell me that's where I need to go, but like, don't make me do that yet, because I'm not ready. Yeah. And they allow it. And then from there, it's that next step where it's like, hey, what can I come into integrity with, and how can I build that relationship in a way that I set the frame and the intention of like, hey, I need your love. I also know you're going to be upset, but I need to, like, this is what I'm putting on the altar, because I'm ready to go to the next step, regardless of what the outcome is. And I've coached a lot of men through this, but the image that I give them is like, when you're going into that conversation, you've got to be to a place where like you are good with you and you love yourself enough that you're willing to do this regardless of what the outcome is, because you don't get to control their emotions. You don't get to control their reaction. You don't get to control any of that. And so the image I give is, imagine you're a boulder in the ocean, and that massive boulder, its job is to just be a boulder. And when the waves come and they crash on it, it doesn't do anything different. It just allows the waves to crash, and they'll go back out and then they'll come back in, and it doesn't react. It doesn't respond. It just allows. And if you can be that and allow the other person to have their experience, you're going to be able to continue to do this process going forward. So
beautifully put. I think the process that I went through, and this is the process that we coach our people through, it's just taking ownership from everything, literally everything. Like I was a victim to abuse as a child, but I created a story that I wasn't good enough because of that. And therefore I sought validation outside of myself. And that's my stuff. It's me taking accountability for everything. Like, I am not a victim. Something happened and I made myself a victim. And when I can take ownership for everything, every altercation, every financial situation, every thought, every action that I take, I can then be really honest with myself about, is this serving me or is this not serving me? And then it puts me in power of choice with where I want to go next. But if I'm not accountable, like if I don't take ownership of my life, if I'm just like, Jeremy's an asshole and he came home and he yelled at me, like, I have no choice in that. I'm powerless, right? So when I start to take my power back, and by doing that is through accountability and ownership, that's how I shift and I become an independent human who can then show up authentically in a relationship.
There's a new trend going around, which is a beautiful trend, which is this idea of like working on yourself or doing the work. Okay. I'm glad it's a trend. Right?
Yeah.
What does this mean to you guys? What does doing the work mean for somebody who's heard this going around? Maybe they follow you guys, maybe they follow others, and you hear this. What does doing the work mean?
I'm like so passionate about this topic.
I know. That's why I'm turning to you.
To me, doing the work is integrating what your awarenesses are. So a lot of times when we get in the work, it's like, oh, I need to heal all this stuff, or, oh, there's, this is what's going on in my life. This is a pattern, right? I'm attracting these same type of partners. I'm attracting these same type of friends, right? Those are all the awarenesses. The work is the integration. The work is changing the mindset, which is not easy. It is forcing yourself to make a different choice and stepping out of the comfort zone. There is zero amount of plant medicine. There's zero amount of retreats, amount of personal development, amount of books that you can do that is going to change your mindset. Integrating those awarenesses from the retreats, from the plant medicine, from the books, and And that is stopping yourself when I'm about to make a choice and a pattern that I've made over and over and over again and doing something different. That's the work.
She nailed it.
Do you have anything to add?
I mean, just to reiterate what she's saying, it's taking action. I mean, every single one of these things, and the buzzword that's out there is that I'm doing the work because I'm in the arena, or I'm reading the book, listening to podcasts, doing the plant medicine, all the different things. It's taking the actual action. And the reality is that you're going to get your nuts kicked in, and it's going to hurt, and it's not going to be perfect, and you're going to make mistakes, but it's continually doing it again and again and again. It's not coming into integrity once and everything's done and you've arrived. You don't arrive. The work is continually progressing, continually showing up, continually being into integrity, continually taking the actions that are necessary.
Thank you to our sponsors over at Bucked Up. I love this company. I love their products, their apparel, and their supplements. Recently, they dropped the mother of all pre-workouts, Mother Bucker. This is not for the faint of heart. This will make you want to claw your face off. So don't get stuck in traffic when you're headed to the gym. I love these guys. I love this company, and I love their products. They are clearly the best tasting pre-workout on the entire market, and they're number one for a reason. Bucked Up is my favorite workout brand, hands down. And they also have my favorite apparel for working out and just for daily life. It's Lululemon-like quality, but for a fraction of the price that's affordable. So head over to their site, buckedup.com, where you can check it out. And for 20% off their entire site, use the code TylerHall20.
Integrating awareness. I love the idea of this. I love that you chose to use that word. I don't know where that came from, if this is your thing or if this is something that you were taught by somebody else, but I think awareness is the right word. It's not integrating what you know, it's not integrating your truth or your knowledge, or I think it's very intentional that you're using the word awareness to describe this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you guys choose to spend your energy and your life on this kind of work, right? You guys could be doing a lot of other things. You could be starting more businesses and making millions of dollars doing it, right? So why spend your life and energy on this?
It was fascinating. You say that, the first thing I think of is we were at a point in our marriage where we were good. We were good. Like, things were good. We had gone from not good to like good. And I remember a conversation where it's like, hey, we're in a really good place, but I want a great relationship. Like, I want a relationship that like I am super proud of and super pumped about and that inspires people. And she's like, me too. And I said, well, let's go to therapy. And she had wanted me to go to therapy for a while when we were in a bad place, and we had that bad therapy experience that I was like, I will not go again.
Yeah.
But at this point I was like, hey, I actually want to go, to therapy. And how do we become great? And I think that there was just so much, as much as building a business and having that certain level of achievement and the freedom that came with that inspired me, having a relationship that was just, and we had examples of people that you could look to that you're like, man, the parts of it, man, they're just so honest with each other, or man, they're just so free with each other, or oh, they have so much fun, or oh, the way that they parent, or the way that, these different parts where it's like, man, we want to be there. And so I think that that's what inspired us. And further than that, I had built, I don't know if you had this experience, but growing up, I always said, by the time I'm 30, ... Because when you're young, like 30's old, right? You're old, but you're still cool. Like, and so I was like, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be a millionaire. By the time I'm 30, I'm going to be married. By the time I'm 30, I'll have a kid. By the time I'm 30, I'll own a house. I'll have this car. Like, I had the list long. And on my 30th birthday, I woke up and I was so depressed. And that entire day, we were up in Park City, Taryn and our son, and we had a hotel, and dinner and shopping and all this stuff. And I was hanging on every text I got that day of like, happy birthday, love you. Da, da, da. Like they would fill me up for a second. And then I'm like, what is going on? And that night we were laying in bed and I started laughing. And she's like, what? And I was like, I figured it out. It's because of this. By the time I'm 30, I had said all of these things. And the problem isn't that I didn't get them, is that I've accomplished every single one, but I don't feel any different. And I realized that I was wanting these external things to make me feel good enough, or to feel loved, or to feel special, or to feel significant. And I didn't. And so that was the turning point of like, okay, well, achievement is really good, but where's the fulfillment? And the fulfillment's going to come through alignment. And so kind of went this other way, and still believe in achieving at a high level and creating experiences and memories and all of those things. But now it's more of an aligned achievement.
Beautifully said. What about you, Taryn?
I think same thing. I think, well, for me, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I didn't find a whole lot of fulfillment there. And we had grown a very successful business, so it wasn't about money. I love women. Like, I'm so passionate about women empowerment and like helping them become their best selves, and helping them love being a mom. If that's what they want, if they're fulfilled being at home, there's so many women out there that's all they wanted growing up, and they have it, and they're still sad. Right? And their relationships are struggling because they're constantly, again, seeking this thing outside of themselves to make them feel good enough. And like, my life has been changed by this work. My life has been changed by integration. I have a peaceful, beautiful, fun, connective, amazing life. And I want that for everybody.
One of the practices that both of you utilize, that's one that has changed my life since I started integrating it about a year ago, is called the I am statement. You guys care if I read you my I am statement?
No.
Especially in your calm, soothing radio.
I know, he has such a good voice.
Perfect voice. I can't wait to hear this.
I am a child of God with potential beyond human imagination. A father to 4 sacred children and a husband to a loving wife. A machine, my habits and routines can't be broken. A man of my word, I do what I say I'm going to do. A doer, watch my feet, not my lips. A long game player, not distracted by instant gratification. An acceptor of people, my ability to judge does not exist. I lift others and always bring good energy. I don't take things personally because I know who I am, full of love for my fellow man, even tempered because I stay present, a calm and kind man, but not to be taken lightly. My sword is sheathed and will only be used if absolutely necessary, called to change the lives of millions of men through my example.
It's beautiful.
That's beautiful.
Taryn, when you were in high school, you had this I am statement on your wall. And if I recall, some of the words that you used were things like, you're not good enough, you're not beautiful enough. And you started believing these things. Right? I think this is words, and the things we tell ourselves are everything, right? So how did you start to correct that?
Oh my gosh. I created I am statements on my wall, which you've heard that story from Jimmy's podcast. Because that is what I was told. And I felt that if I could get myself to believe them, then it wouldn't be so painful when I heard it. The truth is I knew that they weren't true deep down, but because of the masks and the protection and the armor that I put on, that is what that armor was, right? Learning to see my flaws as a part of who I am and what my gifts are was huge for me to transform what that is. And by taking accountability for the things that I did in my life, brought so much value to who I was, even though it wasn't perfect. And that's how I began to believe what was true all along, was that I am beautiful, that I am powerful, and that I am capable, that I am a good mom and a good wife, just because that's who I am, not because of anything that I did or I didn't do.
Jeremy, I think one of the things men struggle a lot with on this is that majority of men attach their identity to what they do or what they've done. Normally professionally, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you encourage men to detach what they do and what they've done from who they are?
Yeah. That's something I've battled with and can empathize with, right? I remember when I had sold my company, I had gone from 10 years of building a company and having thousands of employees, and people ask, what do you do? And that's the first question you get as men when you go to a networking event or anywhere you go.
Totally.
What do you do?
Totally.
And it was probably the question that drove me the most nuts, because at that time it was like, oh shoot, I don't have anything to say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything to say. And so I actually started to get kind of offended by it. And I was like, that's the wrong question. Ask, who are you? And so I actually started asking that question, like, who are you? Tell me about your story. Tell me about who this human is that I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And so really my path, and what I would encourage other men to do is to look at that and to ask, like, who am I? Like, take away my external achievements and the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. Like, who am I? If somebody were to ask, if Tyler didn't know me and said, tell me about Jeremy, what are they going to say? And, regardless of whether you like what it is or not, let's hear what it is. And then what do you want that to be? Because you can also change those things, you know? And so, you know, through that process, I came to find, like, hey, I'm fun. I'm strong. I'm courageous. I'm brave. But most importantly, I make people feel good about themselves. Like, I want people, when I'm not there, to realize that I made an impact. I left them better than I found them.
Yeah.
And so I think that as men, if we can do that, there's a lot more power, and you can show up as that person and not be so worried about comparing yourself to somebody else and trying to live up to external expectations or external validations.
Yeah. Let's talk about being parents. You guys have a few kids.
Mm-hmm. Two.
3 kids. 2 kids. You have 2 kids.
She's got 3. I only have 2. She's got me.
She's got Jeremy plus the 2 young ones.
Yeah.
I know that your journey to get to this place where you can even be parents has been a lot, right? You mentioned multiple miscarriages earlier. Mm-hmm. Today, you talked a little bit about how that affected you and how it affected your marriage. What does being a parent mean to you guys? Like, where does this fit into this whole equation?
That's a great question. Do you have an answer?
I do.
Go ahead.
What does it mean to me? I think it's the most important thing I do. Lately it's felt like one of the hardest things as I look at the responsibility and the opportunity of being a parent. I feel like there's nothing more difficult than watching somebody you love suffer or be in pain or struggle or have insecurities, especially when we've been in this work. And the more we talk about the work being becoming aware and then integrating our awarenesses. I realize I have so much more empathy for my parents, and the responsibility that they took on and the job that they did and the effort that they put forward. But, you know, in my marriage and as a parent, I have to allow my children to struggle. I have to allow them to suffer. I have to allow them to learn hard lessons, and just be there and love them. And it's extremely difficult. And I can't tell you how often I question, like, am I doing this right? Is that going back to this right or wrong? And just trying to stay true to like doing the absolute best that we can to love them and care for them and teach them the best possible way and help them become aware. And I feel like it's the greatest responsibility and the greatest challenge and opportunity.
The stakes, I think, are incredibly high, right? I think that's why we as parents put so much pressure on ourselves, because it's like you only really get one chance to instill certain values and to communicate a certain way and to show love a certain way and affection and these things, right? Jeremy, you know, when you're a father and you get ready to have your first child, you have this vision of like what that's going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, oh, my son, you know, he's going to be happy and healthy and he's going to grow up and he's going to be into sports and he's going to do boy things and he's going to, right? You paint this vision.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been the case for you with your son?
That was the vision I had.
Yeah.
But my oldest, that wasn't the path. Like at a very young age, he absolutely adored his mom. She would change his diaper and to get him to calm down, she'd put her blonde hair in his face. And from that time on, he just literally, he always looked for the blonde hair. And so at 2 years old, he would walk down the Barbie aisles and look at Barbies and call it mommy doll. And he didn't want to play with the bats and the balls and the cars and the dinosaurs and all of those things. He wanted to play with dolls. And that was a really big challenge for me at first. It went from when he was 2 years old, he got his first doll. And by the time he was 3-year-old, he had multiple different dolls. He loved playing dress up. His favorite person was Elsa at the time. He's moved on from Elsa. He's like on to Zendaya now, but Zendaya is his big crush, and he hates Tom Holland because he's together with Zendaya, but that's the drama at our house right now. But he had all these dresses and wigs and heels, and he wanted to do makeup like his mom, and he wanted to be like her. And one day I finally had gotten fed up with it. I went to pick him up from a friend's house, and he was wearing a dress and a wig and had makeup and nails. And I was like, it's time to take that off. It's time to go. And there was a big fight and like a tug of war with all of these things. And I left and I was embarrassed. I'm ashamed to say this, but like I was so worried about what the parents of these kids thought, like about him, what they thought about me as a parent. I started to worry about, you know, him getting made fun of. And there was that selfish part of me that's like, why can't I have a son that's just normal? Like, why can't I have I grew up playing baseball and basketball and football and rollerblading and boxing and every sport you imagine. I loved it. And I couldn't wait to go. My greatest memories is throwing a ball with my dad in the backyard. And I got a son that wants none of that. And I can't relate to him at all. And so one day I just came home. That day I came home and I gathered up all of his stuff, his dolls, his wigs, and I threw it all away. It was like, we're going to go cold turkey. This is a problem. And I was blaming her. Like, you created this. You enabled this.
Yeah.
If I was a stay-at-home dad, this wouldn't be the case. Like, he would be into the things. Like, we had a say in this. And for the next 2 weeks, he was very, like, he didn't know for sure that I had taken it all. I mean, he's a 3-year-old, but he was cold towards me. And he would tell me to go away, and he'd say no, and very unaffectionate towards me. And I could feel this like animosity. And I was on the road. I was at a retreat, personal development retreat, and I was talking to one of my mentors, and I just said, hey, like, this is going on with my son. And he's like, well, what's changed? And I was like, well, there is this thing. And he's like, oh, you think that might be it? Like, I told him about taking all the dolls away and everything. And he looked at me and he said, Jeremy, what are you afraid of? And I was like, oh, what do you mean? You know? And he's like, no, what are you afraid of? I said, I'm afraid that my son might be gay. I'm afraid that he might want to be a girl. I'm afraid that he's going to get made fun of. And I'm terrified of that. And he said, well, what if that's true? I said, that would be extremely hard. And he went on to kind of share with me about like the statistics of people that are gay or transition or any of those things, like suicide rates. And he's like, why do you think that is? And I was like, I feel like probably because they don't feel accepted. And he goes, yeah. He goes, so if all of those things were true, would you still love him? And I said, absolutely, without a doubt. He goes, well, don't you think it's important that you let him know that? And it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was living in complete fear. And I was letting that fear come out to him, and that my son's interpretation of that was that I didn't love him. I didn't accept him. And a light bulb went on, and I just knew like, that's not true. I love him no matter what. And we didn't cause this. All my responsibility to do is to make sure that he knows that he feels safe at home, and that I show him that, and put myself aside, my desire to throw a ball and whatever else aside. And so I flew home the next morning. I called Taryn and told her what happened. And she's like, good, like, good job, buddy. And I flew home. I drove into the house. I picked him up. I took him to the store, and we picked out the most beautiful Elsa dress. And he hugged and kissed me like crazy that day. And then a couple weeks later, I surprised him. I ordered a 6'3", 220-pound size dress that could fit me. And I walked in with that dress and asked him if I could play with him. And he was just lit. He had gone from, hiding whenever he was playing certain things, or when he'd play games and I'd try to play with him, he would have me be the boy and he'd be the girl. And I'd be like, no, I want to be this princess. She's pretty. And he's like, no, you're a boy. You have to do this. But when I showed up in the dress, he's like, oh, Dad can hang. Let's go. And he let me play with him at his level with what he wanted. And you could just see the change of like, oh, Dad does accept me. And it's just been this thing now for the last number of years where he can talk to me. He's 8 now, and he still likes to play with dolls. And even yesterday, he told me, we were talking about stress, and I told him I had some stress, and he's like, I have stress. I'm like, you don't have stress, dude. You're 8 years old. And he goes, oh, I do. I have stress. And one of the things he said is like, I'm weird. I'm different. People don't like me. And I said, why? And he goes, because I like girl stuff. And, he deals with that outside the house, and I can't control that. I can't change that for him, but I can just let him know that I love him and that I'm there for him no matter what. And I'm proud of that.
That's beautiful. Taryn, you earlier talked about, being a mother wasn't enough for you. Your cup wasn't full. Mm-hmm. There are probably women out there that hear that, and it probably triggers them. It probably makes them angry. Like, well, that's our calling as women. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to love, right? How did you grapple with that? Just the idea that being a mother wasn't going to fill your cup all the way. And what is that calling, similarly to Jeremy? What does that mean to you?
I love being a mom. I love my kids. I raise very independent children. I'm really proud of that. My kids know that I love them. They know that I'm safe. I mean, that story Jeremy just shared, Nixon was always himself with me. Right? It's not that I was a better parent than he was. It's just I was safe for him. And I was raised with a stay-at-home mom who is very unhappy. And I want to show my kids that their voice matters. And I want women to know that their voice matters. And that's where I'm best. Like, that's where I'm best. I'm a better mom when I can go serve others and teach my kids that way. And I know that's not for everybody, but that is what is for me. I'm a better wife because of that.
We could sit here for many hours, and it would be great. And I'm going to ask both of you to come back on individually, because there's more. There's a lot more here. I want to close with this, though, because we've got your boy Travis waiting for us right outside. He wouldn't let me.
Okay.
I want to close with this, to kind of pick up where we started, or close with where we started, which is there's millions of couples and relationships, marriages out there that are struggling, that are going through it. What is your advice for these people? The easy answer is, let's just end this thing.
Yeah.
Just be done. I've talked about it with my wife several times. You guys have talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still married.
Mm-hmm.
You're still married, right? So what is your advice, Jeremy, to the men first? And you can talk to them in that camera, that are just ready to throw in the towel.
Yeah. So in this place, I encourage you to look at yourself. Take a moment, step back, and stop looking at what your wife is doing or not doing, or what needs of yours she's not meeting, and look at yourself. Take full responsibility for yourself, for your actions, how you can be better. Become aware of those things. And I get it. In every relationship, it's extremely hard, and you really only have 3 choices. You can either accept it completely, you can change it, or you can leave. And before I ever want to make a choice of leaving, I want to look at, can I accept this or can I change it? And you're probably feeling like you can't accept this completely. And so change is the next option. And when it comes to changing it, you can only change you. You can't change the other person. Other people can change, but you can't be the one to change them. And so take full responsibility for you, where you're at, the decisions you're making, the choices you've made, your needs, meet your needs. If you're not feeling loved and accepted, start by loving and accepting yourself and showing the other person how to do that for you. We've, as the men, need to lead. And so show her, and give her an opportunity to follow suit.
Taryn, same question for the women out there who are thinking about throwing in the towel on their marriage.
I believe marriage is a very sacred relationship. We as women are bred that men are supposed to take care of us in this specific way, and that we're supposed to be treated a certain way, and that relationships are all sunshine and roses and butterflies. I mean, since we watched Disney movies as a kid. And the truth is that marriage is a sacred relationship because it's a mirror for you. If Jeremy loved me the way that I wanted to be loved, I would never learn to love myself the way that I needed to be loved. And so him being a challenge for me held up a really beautiful mirror for myself, for the work that I needed to do, for the way that I needed to learn to love myself. And that's how we teach another person to love us. And so that's what I ask you guys to do. Look at the mirror, look at the reflection, and take accountability and feed yourself. Feed your own validation. Tell yourself you love yourself. Quit waiting for somebody else to do it.
Wow. Jeremy, Taryn, thanks for joining the roller coaster today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, that's a wrap.